Good evening. I'm Dr. Greenbrier Allman. Thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each week on Channel 3, I'm happy to talk about this interface between Christianity and medicine. And tonight, I guess I have a strange interface tonight, the rainbow. But I want to try to tell a story that if there are children watching, it'll make sense to them and explain, in a sense, my interest in rainbows. It comes from various ways, but something happened this week that brought it all back into focus to me. I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where we have a new granddaughter, and of course I'm proud about that, Eliza Eloise Almond Pope, and she's doing well. And we were visiting, and I was playing. I was being Lolo, as we say in the Philippines, or Grandpa, as we say here in the mountains, but I was enjoying my time there in Ann Arbor, and lo and behold, a storm came up. Now, they have had storms, of course, across the Midwest this spring, this being the first day of spring, but even in the latter part of winter, we've had very devastating storms with tornadoes. Well, this time it was our turn there in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, and lo and behold, there was a funnel cloud, a tornado that landed about 10 miles from us in a little town called Dexter, outside of Ann Arbor, and about 10 miles away from where we were, and it destroyed parts of, or most of, about 100 homes. And we knew it was coming, so we went to the basement to wait, but of course we had to peekaboo out the window. It was a ferocious storm, thunder and lightning, and the rain coming down. There was hail the size of marbles, and it coated the whole earth so that it might be an inch or two of this hail. And the storm lasted for several hours. Our daughter Maria was at the hospital working, and we were home, but she was escorted because of a tornado warning to the basement with other employees who were at work. So she spent the last 2 hours of work and into the evening down in the basement. She missed the storm, but she was safe, and we were at home, and we were safe in the end. And after the storm was over, then there was this wonderful rainbow. And this is not the only time that I've experienced rainbows, but this is the latest time, and it was a sign that the storm is over, that God promised in Genesis with Noah and Noah's family, there were 8 people left on earth, that God would never send a storm that would destroy the whole earth. And so there's where the locus of the story of the rainbow begins in Genesis. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for me, it also began in my own childhood here in Buchanan, and my mother had a fascination with rainbows. And we lived up on the hill above Buchanan, and it would seem that most storms would come from the west and then go east. And so as the sun would come out after the storm, the clouds would be going toward Elkins, and we could look over Water Tank Hill from where we lived, and we could see a rainbow. And Mother would dutifully get her camera and rush out to the front door and take a picture of the rainbow. Most of the pictures did not turn out to show, the beauty of the rainbow, or a double rainbow, or a triple rainbow sometimes. But I was aware as a little boy that my mother was fascinated with rainbows, and so I have been fascinated over the years. Well, this storm last week in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Dexter, the little community that had the devastation of the tornado, caused me to want to talk about rainbows, because yet another thing that's been happening, and this is where the interface between Christianity and medicine comes for me. I have been working with children since the year 2000. I was at that time still with the VA practicing, but was doing some part-time work on a grant with children up at the Rock Cave Clinic, and at that time called the Tri-County Clinic. And so on Wednesday night I would see children, and have continued to see children And now, of course, I serve on the school board. So my interest in children has taken me further than I meant to go, maybe, but also it's a good journey. And of course, now being a grandfather, it's a great journey. Well, I became aware in the year 2000 and then onward to now to 2012 that when I bring up this story of the rainbow to children in the office, because I might be talking about a promise or a covenant or things turning out well that don't seem like they can end well. Some of the children, many of the children don't know what I'm talking about. They are puzzled by that. They have not been taught either the legend of the rainbow, if you want to think about the Irish celebration we just had and the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that is an Irish custom. Again, many of us here in the mountains are Scotch-Irish. Children don't know that story. They certainly don't know the story of Noah and the rainbow and God's covenant. But I think it's time to talk about that because we have storms. We have storms, and we were safe there in the basement and safe in Ann Arbor. But there were people who were shaken up, and definitely their property was destroyed. But the rainbow came out after the storm was over. Well, let me talk a little bit about the rainbow then, and see in the next few minutes if we can make sense of this story and what it means, and why maybe my mother would hold it dear, maybe why I bring it up, trying to teach a truth, a principle of life to children, and perhaps also what the Bible says about the rainbow. If we go back to the story of Genesis, the 9th chapter, early in the book of Genesis, God is saying to Noah and to his sons, I'm going to establish a covenant with you and your descendants after you. Now, the first principle of a covenant is that the promise is made by God. God as we understand God. God is almighty, wonderful, loving, but we can't make promises that we can keep, can we? I mean, if you just think about this, we promised something. We promised New Year's resolutions. We have not kept them. But God can make a covenant, God can make a promise, and He can keep it. So that's a first principle. And God said, I'll make this with Noah, with his sons and his family, and every living creature, the birds, the domestic animals, every animal on earth. So that's the other thing here about this principle of the rainbow. It's so beautiful because it's not just for humans, it's for birds, it's for fish, it's for the animals, domesticated animals, the animals that were on the ark, two of every kind, the story goes. And it's for all of those. He says, I will, never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. So it's a covenant, a promise that there won't be that type of devastation. Though we were shook up, and many people have been shaken up by storms in this springtime. And he says, I have set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And I'll bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds. And I'll remember that covenant. So God will remember the covenant. And every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. So see, the rainbow is a symbol for all of us, isn't it? An everlasting covenant, one that never ends. And this is the sign I've established between me and all flesh here on earth. Now, so that's a fascinating story. Those are God's words, and as recorded in Genesis, talking about the rainbow. When I was practicing medicine in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the 80s, I was there for 2 years and was the residency training director in the psychiatry program at the City of Faith at Oral Roberts University. I practiced in a hospital building that was based upon the principle of Noah's Ark. In other words, the building was as big as the Ark. You know, when you start talking about cubits and how many cubits high and how many cubits long and how many cubits wide and so forth. The hospital base was that big, of course, in square feet. But it was 4 stories tall, just the same as you might imagine a ship being so deep and so high. And so the hospital had that 4-story base, and it was as big as the Ark. And then out of the middle of that 4 stories, there were 3 towers. And our hospital tower was 30 stories tall. Our office tower was 60 stories tall. And our research tower was 20 stories tall. So that's as big as Buchanan, if you want to think about it that way. If you think about from Wesleyan College over to St. Joseph's Hospital, including all of the downtown area, that would be how big the Ark is. And then these huge towers were coming up out of the 4-story base. So this was perhaps the City of Faith, as Oral Roberts built that to resemble the Ark, is still one of the larger buildings outside of New York City or some of our major cities, which have skyscrapers and huge buildings. But an unusual structure out in the middle of the Great Plains in Oklahoma. Indeed, when you fly into Tulsa or out of Tulsa, you circle around that tower, and it stands out. And I remember watching rainstorms come across the Great Plains from my office tower. I was on the 44th story of the 60-story tower, and I would look out this window and I would see the storm as it rolled across the plain, see the lightning and thunder, and I often worried then that we might have a tornado there in Tulsa, though the 2 years we were there, we didn't have one. But this past week, we had one within 10 miles of us there in Ann Arbor. Well, so Oral Roberts felt the story of Noah was important, the story of the Ark. Now, if you want to just go one more step here, how this gets into our culture and everywhere, the word navis has to do with the Ark. Again, it's the root word for the ship, the Ark. And we have also the term Navy. And many people are Marines, Navy, Army, Air Force. You know, the Armed Forces is made up of the Navy. And that has to do, the word navis, and then we get the word Navy, has to do with the Ark. It goes back to that same concept. And every church, when it has the sanctuary where people worship inside a church, then that is called the nave of the church, N-A-V-E. So we have not only hospitals that are shaped like the Ark, but we have the middle part where people worship in churches called the nave, having to do with the Ark. So this is a tremendous promise that God has made about the rainbow. Also want to make another principle, because I'm just trying to teach here how I see this and how it often comes up in my sessions with children. I'll ask them to, of course, identify the colors of the rainbow. And many children, of course, know the colors, the primary colors, the red, the orange, the yellow. That's one side of the rainbow. Then you have the green in the middle, and then you have the blue, the indigo, and the violet on the other spectrum. And those are the colors of the rainbow. And we were taught as children to call that Roy G. Biz. So Roy, R-O-Y, red, orange, yellow, G, and then blue, indigo, violet, BIV, B-I-V. Now, in my work with children and with families, I often say we're working over here on one end of the spectrum, the indigo-violet range. In other words, we're interpreting behavior and trying to make it better. I love the 4-H motto, to make the best better. But we're trying to tease out a difference between indigo and violet, or the shades of violet even, and helping people behave better. And in a sense, make a behavioral contract, make a covenant with their own family to do better. I had as an example today a young man who got very angry yesterday, and he was beginning to mow his grandfather's lawn, and he became very angry. I don't know if the lawnmower wouldn't start, or the grandfather had instructions that he couldn't easily follow, but whatever happened, all those things together, he got very angry and then pouted and was distressed and cursed and stomped his feet and so forth. And that's unsatisfactory to the family, as it would be to any family who wants to raise a young man to get along with the boss, or get along with his school teacher, or get along with his own family. He has to have a certain decorum and a certain behavior. So we're teasing out that on that one end of the spectrum, that indigo-violet area, how that young man can do better in the future. That's how it often comes into my conversation too, because I can use the principle of the rainbow, and people will understand what we're talking about when we talk about making an improvement or identifying what's happening. I'm not talking about the difference between red and violet. I'm talking about the difference between the better and the best. The enemy of the best is better. We don't want to settle for better. We want the best, right? That's a principle too. So let's look at another part of this. Then I want to, as I teach about this, this became, and we are in the season of Lent now in the Christian church. We're leading up to the 40 days of the of Lent, and excluding Sundays, I guess 46 days from Ash Wednesday to Easter. And but we can learn here what this is all about and continue the story, if you will, of the rainbow and the promise. So in 1 Peter, that's a letter that Peter, one of the apostles, one of Jesus' disciples, wrote. He likens this in the 3rd chapter to the ark and to Noah and to the rainbow. And he said, this is verse 20 of the 3rd chapter, who in former times did not obey when God waited patiently in the days of Noah during the building of the ark, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were saved through water. So there was a chaos, the storm came, the earth was flooded, 8 people were saved. And so Peter is recalling that story. And he goes on and says, your baptism is like that too. Baptism in which it prefigures how you're saved. It's not the removal of dirt when you take a bath, but it's an appeal to God, he says, for a good conscience, and an appeal through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ becomes the ark, if you will, that transforms us or carries us through our baptism to God. And God is making a covenant. And Jesus Christ has gone into the heaven and is at the right hand of God with the angels, authorities, and powers that are made subject to him. So that's a ties, if you will, the story of Noah a little bit to our baptism, which again is another symbol. But this is a very rich symbol because, again, water, which has been chaos, now is water which can be something that carries us to God. The covenant is still there. I'll get back to talking to you here but let me lay out just one more bit of principle here. This is Mark, the 1st chapter of Mark. This is the story of Jesus' baptism, and because Peter's mentioned Jesus. And the story goes like this. In those days, Jesus of Nazareth was baptized by John in the Jordan. And he was coming up out of the water. He saw the heavens torn apart, and the Spirit descended on him like a dove. So again, the presence of God in something natural, this time described as a dove. A Spirit descended like a dove on him, and a voice from heaven said, "You are my Son, my beloved. With you I am well pleased." So God has spoken to Noah, saying, I'm going to put this ark in the sky for you as my covenant with you forever and ever. And now God is speaking to Jesus, saying, you are my Son, my beloved, with whom I am well pleased. Now, did God speak to me in my storm in Ann Arbor when the hurricane or the tornado is 10 miles away? No, but common sense spoke to me. I mean, stay inside, go to the basement, protect yourself. You know, it's like God is speaking to us in different ways, isn't he? And we can feel what our parents taught us. We can feel what we've learned in school. We can hear different things, different voices inside of us at different times, but sometimes God's voice. The Spirit, in this case, that Spirit that came like a dove on Jesus, then drove him into the wilderness, which is an unsafe place. The water is chaos. Wilderness is chaos. There's wild animals in the wilderness. And he was tempted by Satan. He was there for 40 days. Again, you have the storm. You have Lent. You have Moses up on the mountain. All these are 40 days. And then he's tempted by Satan. He was with the wild beast, and the angels waited on him. So in the end, Jesus says, and he comes back and he says, the kingdom of God has come near. Repent, believe the good news. So when I'm sitting with a child and the child has been abused, neglected, horrible things have happened, and they're trying to sort this out, I want to say to them something hopeful. And I have found it useful to say, look at the rainbow. It's a wonderful sign in the heavens, in the sky. It comes after the storm. I had one lady tell me one time, and I've repeated this too, she said, whatever doesn't kill me will make me stronger. And she's referring to her own abuse and then the fact she's a survivor. And she was the one, as a victim, but she survived that and she's stronger. So we can look into the sky, get excited about the rainbow, and say that's a sign that I'm going to survive. There's a covenant. It's for all animals. It's for humans. It's for children. It's for all of us. And then if you want to carry it just a little bit further, then you can be safe inside certain buildings. Hospitals can be shaped like the nave, like the ark. Schools can be, you can imagine that. Schools could have that shape too, be safe places. Of course, the church can be a safe place. And our home needs to be a safe place, and it can be. And those in relationship to us, because you can see here also, there were 8 people on Noah's Ark, plus 2 animals of all kinds. But there were 8 people, and from that 8 people, then the earth was repopulated. And how did that happen? You know, I don't know all those details, but you can see how this can teach us that there's a covenant that's working. And now, what is our part? Well, we can't make the promise ourselves. We can only receive the promise. When we are baptized, we're also receiving the promise of God, aren't we? The completed work of Jesus on the cross, the resurrection that we'll celebrate at Easter here in a few weeks, is a part of that. But there's nothing we can do except receive it. And so I like to look then, I can see myself. You can maybe do visual imagery yourself now, thinking about a rainbow. But I can see myself as a little boy being called by my mother to the front door to look up into the sky. There's the sun is behind us on Mount Hibbs. It's shining now. The storm has passed from there, passed over our head, passed over Water Tank Hill. There's a dark sky over there, and against that dark sky there's a rainbow. And we can look at that and say, look at that. The colors are true, aren't they? It's always red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. They're always that way. There's a pattern there that's also, the covenant is always true. Even if you look at it from a purely scientific spectrum analysis, it's true. You can also pick it apart and say, well, look over here. Can you see the differences? Unless you're colorblind or some other reason can't see colors, you can see the indigo, the violet. You can learn principles about life. You can learn that we can control our anger, or we can control our other behaviors. And then we learned the principle as a child that we're body, mind, and spirit. Yes, we're a body. The body can be harmed, but the body has a spirit, and the spirit can endure and rise up. You heard the story of the little boy whose father's wanting him to sit down and be quiet, and finally the father orders him and sits him down in a chair and says, "Sit there and be quiet." And the little boy says, "Well, Dad, I'm sitting down now in my body, but I'm standing up in my spirit." In other words, he has will and determination. And so we have body, we have spirit, we have mind. We can think things out and see that there's a hope. Now, where does that take us then in this season? Because I'm in this season of our life in our country, I want to talk about that for a minute too, because since 2000, you get out of high school, your kids are raised, you stop thinking about kids for a while. I mean, this is a stage of life for adults, and 64 years old, I don't think about kids every day. I wasn't in 2000. I was thinking about veterans, but veterans have families too. In any event, I started working with children again, and I realized that that many children don't know these symbols. And I'm hoping that the next time a teacher, a parent, a grandparent, a scout leader, 4-H leader, if they see a rainbow, take the child aside for a little bit and say, "This represents a promise." And you can fabricate your story too if you want to say the story of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's a good story too. But you can also tell the greater story that in Genesis 9 there's a story of Noah and his family when there was total chaos. It was devastation. It was wipeout. And yet God said, "I'm making that covenant." God's making the covenant, and He's making it for all creatures. How good we are, how poor we are, it doesn't matter. How rich we are, how well behaved we are, how wild we are. It's for all creatures. And I will never destroy the earth again, and I will be there for you. And it's a covenant. Well, until the next time, this is Dr. Greenbrier Allman thanking you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. I hope that you'll look at the rainbow a little bit differently the next time you see one. I know that after being this close to a tornado, that I'm glad to be in West Virginia, where our mountains seem to protect us, but even then, there's a greater protection, and that is the one that I see behind the rainbow. We'll see you next week.